On behalf of Spring Nature, we would like to thank UTHM Library for helping us to organize today's training session for you, the users and students and researchers and staff of UTHM, in order to get familiar with the platforms or databases, you might know them as, that are available to you, made available to you via your UTHM library. So my name is Kent Yap, please call me Kent. I am a licensing manager for Springer Nature here in Malaysia and Brunei, and my main responsibilities are to conduct sessions like this today, but primarily to engage with libraries to ensure that researchers all around Malaysia are able to gain access to really, really useful resources in order for you guys, including students as well, for you to do your daily routine activities as students, including, for example, getting access to resources like textbooks, material for you to do your tutorials, and for researchers yourself, access to really valuable information or articles in order for you to conduct your research that you do on a daily basis. So I'm just going to, now that you've seen me and I'm a real person, I'm going to turn off my camera so that bandwidth is not affected. And I would then like, of course, to bring your attention to the screen itself. So today will be about getting to know, if you're not already familiar with, the two databases that Springer Nature has made available through your library, like I mentioned earlier, for you to utilize as part of the subscriptions to the databases that they are on offer to you. So the first of which is called Springer Link. And here on the slide here, there are actually a few details that I can put some metrics or numbers in order to catch your attention. So on Springer Link itself, you have actually access to 500 plus current Springer, Palgrave, and other society-based journals with content up to date, up to this year. And they are from a wide subject area coverage in terms actually for UTHM, it's primarily in the STM side, so everything from the physical and life sciences, including engineering, mathematics, computer science, chemistry, material sciences, and etc. But also inclusive are some subjects from the social sciences, particularly business and management, economics and finance, and behavioral sciences and psychology, and a little bit about education as well. So the reason why this range of topics were chosen as this is because these are what you call the niche research and teaching and learning areas of UTHM, and hence the library has very carefully curated the right kinds of titles and journals that are going to cater to the needs of the group of researchers and students that are in your university. So apart from the apart from the 500 subscribed titles, there are also additionally another 1,000 plus fully open access journals that are published by Springer Nature throughout the various databases, including Springer Link itself. I think in Springer Link alone, there is 600 out of this 1,000 that I mentioned earlier, and the rest of them lie on our other different platforms, including BMC, which is Biomed Central. Maybe not so relevant to those of you in UTHM, unless perhaps you're doing something like biomedical engineering, for example. And the others are on our other platform, nature.com. So before I talk a little bit further about the two databases, I think there's one public awareness notice or a public awareness notice I want to share on behalf of the library. Is actually that in order to access correctly, to avoid any doubt of being able to access or not access these resources that we talked about earlier, that I mentioned earlier, please always log in through the authenticated access. What this means is you should, by right, be logging in via your university library website. As you can see on the right-hand side of the page here, this is your UTHM Library official portal. And if you go to e-resources, you will be asked to log in via your student or staff username and password and to log in, regardless of whether or not you are logging in. You are logging in through the Wi-Fi when you're in the university campus, or you are doing your accessing via an external internet source, for example, using your phone, your mobile network, or if you're at home or outside of campus using a computer. So this is to ensure that whatever you are searching on the various databases, including Springer Link, you will always be able to access the contents that have been paid for by the library and to avoid any frustration. So like I said, going back to the platform itself, there are two platforms we will focus on today, or that I will be sharing about. The first is Springer Link, and on the top left-hand side, you can see the URL to the platform. It's actually link.springer.com. You will see a link to this platform after you have logged into your e-resources or your, what do you call it, your virtual private network from your library. The second one is actually nature.com. So nature.com is actually a different website. It's two different databases, and nature.com actually consists of, publishes titles, journals only, from two different imprints of ours. The first of which is the very famous Nature imprint. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's this very beautiful front cover of this week's publication, this week's issue of Nature. So Nature is actually very interestingly a weekly publication, very rare that you will see a journal of that is ranked #1 in its field, which is also a weekly publication. So I explained a little bit more about why it's weekly publication and the qualities of Nature later on. They may not, again, because of the type of titles that are under this imprint. I'm not so sure whether they are necessarily related to the courses being taught in UTHM or the research being done in UTHM. Hence why, again, the library does not necessarily subscribe to these titles. But for Nature, the main title, again, the one on the left, that is accessible to you. So just a little bit more information. Later we will actually go to the platforms itself. This is my last slide. So just to explain a little differences between both the Springer, the journals that are published on Springer versus the ones on Nature. So Nature is a little bit more unique and very much more niche in that sense, because again, it is a very highly reputable journal. It is ranked #1 in the field of multidisciplinary sciences. And because it's such a how you call it, highly impact, highly recognized title, it publishes basically the most important advances and research findings with the most widest implications. So significance in terms of the papers being published is to anyone in any field, or even a layman, that means a person who is not necessarily a researcher, are the kind of audiences that you will find relevant to the Nature journal, so the main title. Apart from the Nature main title, there are also what you call it, sub journals titles inside the Nature branded journals itself. So you have the Nature research journals. So Nature research journals are actually divided into two more, not shown here on this slide, but I can show you later on the live website, whereby one is the the Nature branded journals, which are focusing on individual niche subject areas. And then the other side is actually the Nature review journals. So Nature review journals, as in the namesake, means also they are journals that mainly cover review papers, review manuscripts. Then the third one below that is the Nature Communications, as you can see. So Nature Communications and Scientific Reports are actually titles, all of which are open access. So like I mentioned earlier, part of the 1,000 plus open access journal titles available to you, being published by the bigger Springer Nature brand, but on the different platform. Right, so those cover a little bit more general in terms of subject area, and those are where I believe you will find as users, students, or researchers from UTHM, you will find relevant articles that are useful for you based on your niche areas of interest. Okay, so that's all for slides. We'll actually now very quickly jump over to the platforms itself. So the first place, I just want to check, Mabel, can you see my browser screen? Mabel? Okay, I just hope that everybody can hear me. But what I wanted to showcase again is going back to the UTHN library, where this should be the first place you start whenever you're searching for database resources. And what you should do is when you, of course, you Google UTHN library, you click in, this is the place you will appear first. And if you go to e-resources and you click under, I understand, you will be asked to put in I will be asked to put in, you will be, sorry, not I, you will be asked to put in information on your username and password itself. So, okay, once you've done that, you will again be presented with a list of different databases that are published by UTHM, sorry, that are subscribed by UTHM, my apologies, and one of which will be Springerling. When you click on that, you will be redirected to the Springerling platform itself. And today I will start with this and then we will end with nature. So as you can see, the Springerling platform is a relatively clean looking, simple, not too complicated kind of database. And again, it's designed as such. And I think the most important thing to highlight when on the main page of when you logged into Springerling itself is actually how are you sure that when you've logged in correctly, so that when you do try to download or access any of the journal articles or books or whatsoever, that you will be able to get those that have been subscribed for you on behalf. And those two telltale signs are actually number one, this box in the middle right-hand side of the page, where it says new books and journals are available every day. So this box should be indicated in the color, or should be colored in this maroon or magenta, or like a dark pink color. If you see in this color, like you're seeing on my screen, it means you've logged in correctly. If this box was in orange or like a very dark yellow, some would call it, that is a sign that maybe perhaps you have not logged in correctly as an authenticated user, and along the way there must have been some mistake somewhere. I urge you again to start back from the beginning, go to the library website, click e-resources, and then log in. So the good thing about post-pandemic is that our developers have actually made it such that the first time you've logged in correctly, your computer browser would have been automatically detected that you are an authorized UTHM user. And every time you come back to this web page, even if it's not necessarily through the library website, let's say you just forgot one day and you just came directly here because you bookmarked this page, as long as you have not cleared your browser's cache or your history, it should be able to still detect that you are an authorized user, and this box will still appear in this color. Next telltale sign is actually if you scroll to the bottom, you will find that this part I am highlighting should indicate or should have the word, the name of your university indicated, or brought to you by UTHM, for example. I'm not currently logged in at UTHM, hence you don't actually see it, and I've actually logged in through my own organization. But again, if you see your university's name at the bottom there, it is a sign that you are being recognized as an authorized user. Okay, so that's about how to log in. And now we're going to talk about what are the functions of this platform, and also why is it important for you to gain access to such databases. So perhaps I can address the first one, which is probably the more fundamental question. Often I am asked, or you might have this question in your mind, is why is it important to search for information, to search for articles or books from databases like Springerling? Not limited to Springerling alone on nature.com, but also the other databases that are subscribed by your library. For example, Wiley Online Library, Science Direct, Taylor and Francis Online, etc., etc., etc. There are so many databases I'm sure you will find when you search through your library website. So I think the most important and fundamental part is that you can trust the information that you get from these websites, as opposed to, for example, going on to Google or even Google Scholar, for example. If you just type in, traditionally, and I was a student at one time and doing the same thing, if you merely go on to the World Wide Web in general and search for information that way, yes, you would. It is very likely you get a wider range of results, which may point to different resources all over the World Wide Web. However, it is important, especially in the academic setting, whether or not you're a student or you're a lecturer or you're a researcher, that you can identify the validity or the validity of the information, how trustworthy it is. So of course, this a very basic example that I was taught when I was in university a number of years ago, was that, for example, you could trust the information in your textbook, but not necessarily the information you would find on Wikipedia. So a lot of that is because things that you can find in your textbooks or in journals in the databases such as Springerling is so that because the findings, the research, the papers that have been published by reputable publishers like Springer Nature have gone through the process of peer review. So peer review essentially just means that, in the simplest form, that when an expert such as yourself, if you've done research, you've discovered something, when you wanted to share that finding with the rest of the world, that information that you are sharing has been validated and double checked by an equally renowned expert as yourself around the world, and that they can identify and agree with your findings itself. So in essence, somebody has double checked all of these things that have been published on databases like these, and you can then trust the information that you can use it for later purposes, including, for example, answering questions for your tutorial, or doing your literature review for your thesis that you're about to write, or that conference proceeding that you are going to prepare for, and therefore need your citations, etc., etc. Right? So that really pretty much is the reason why you would go to databases like Springerling, like Nature.com, in order to get access to authoritative information that will help you in your journey as a researcher or even a student for that matter. So with that being said, now let's actually talk about the actual platform itself. So this is the homepage, like I mentioned earlier. Nothing really much to place an importance of. As long as you're logged in correctly, you do not, as I showed you earlier, you do not have to click this sign up or login page at the top. This is purely voluntary in a sense. So even if you see, oh, okay, wait, Kent, you said we logged in through the library earlier, we do not need to log in again. That's very true. But if you can, and if you want to, you can create a profile on Springerling itself, just like the way you would create a profile on Facebook or in LinkedIn or in Instagram, for example. And what are the purposes of doing so? Is actually so that when you have done a lot of searching, spent lots of time on a platform like Springerling, you would want to be able to save some of your searches in order to save time in the future, to prevent having to redo a lot of the work that you've done previously. And because platform like Springerling is constantly updated, so you will see this number that says 15,431,897 resources published. This number grows every single day, because every single day newer and more and more research is being published on a platform like this and is considered live. So when you create your own profile, it really helps to help yourself be your own librarian in some sense, to curate your own search history, your own findings, your own set of different journals that you always want to keep reading, instead of having to research for them all over again. But again, not mandatory. Then the next very prominent part of the platform is actually this global search bar. So here is where you can put in anything. You can put in any keyword. For example, we can put in something very prominent happening very soon. For example, elections. So let's put this term. And when you click on it, you click enter, the platform will return to you the term that you have searched for, in my case, elections, from only within the platform itself. So again, a difference versus something you do in Google as opposed to inside this platform. In Google, when you search for the term elections, it will come out results from the whole World Wide Web. So you will be able to get returns or results from news portals. You'll be able to get results from cartoons, YouTube, or including platforms like Springerling. So when you're searching inside databases like this, your results are confined to what is found within the database in itself. And that again helps you to determine the trustworthiness of the findings that you see here. So in this results page, as you can see there, when I search for the term elections, there's 228,820 results coming from various different content types, including journal articles, books, conference proceedings, and even videos for that matter, right? As a rule of thumb, or as a word of suggestion, it is usually best for you to keep your keyword searches to individual keywords as opposed to putting full sentences inside the search bar here. This is because the formulation or the algorithm when searching for the keywords whenever you put inside, if you have put a sentence, there are certain operators or Boolean operators, as you may have heard before this term, that may affect the search criteria when it's in place as a sentence. So usually in a sentence, it's usually very long, 10 to 20 words. There are commas and there are terms like and, or, question marks, etc., or even hyphens that may determine or change the result of your search, and therefore making it less accurate to what you necessarily want. So as a good advice that I will give is that when using platforms like Springerlink, try to keep your keyword searches to again individual terms, or also try to keep them try to keep the keywords to between 3 to 5 keywords in itself. So you obviously, just by searching elections, for example, it's a very broad-based term. But if you wanted to make it more niche, for example, we can say Malaysia, right? We can also put that, and you see I use the term comma. So now everything, the results from 228,000 to only 12,908. So what this means is that the keyword searches is now limiting the results that has the term elections and Malaysia in the same document in itself. And of course, the more terms you increase into the search criteria, you'll be filtering out more and more and more results, and therefore achieving a more and more niche or more accurate or a more specific search results that you are looking for. I think in best practice that I've understood from many researchers or more seasoned people who do literature review a lot more than me, is that you tend to want to keep this number to be a more manageable size. So let's say typically between 50 to 100 results. And that's usually when you can actually start to spend the time to actually look through individual documents, to read through the abstract, to read through the introduction and maybe a little bit of the results, to see really whether or not you should include that documentation, that journal article, or that book for that matter, as part of your literature review when you're writing your thesis or whatever, right? So the more you increase, so let's say let's put another term here. So let's say let's put the term government, right? So we're going to making this should, but in theory, make this smaller and smaller as you make it more and more niche. You can even put 20, let's put 2018, for example. That number should continue to decrease to a point where you should only return the results based on the really niche keywords that you have found. In any case, that is just an example of the sorry, I'm getting a message here. Hold on. Next, in part of the search bar, I'm going back to the home page. Excuse me for the slight diversion. The other two main points main sections of the platform I want to point out is actually this browse by discipline section, and also this browse by content type section. So for example, if you're very new to this type of platform and you just wanted to get an understanding or a gauge of what's available, but in your area of interest, you can always start by browsing based on the discipline that you're interested in. So obviously, coming from UTHM, I presume many of you are from the areas or interested in the areas of engineering. And engineering in itself is a very strong subject area being found in Springerlink itself, whereby we publish, as you can see, easily over 1 million individual documents related to the term engineering, right? So you can browse by discipline, but what you should also do then is actually to then continue to filter those results based on this sub-discipline itself. So again, engineering is very large, very broad term. There are many facets of engineering. And perhaps, for example, you're interested in automotive engineering. You can use this sub-discipline filter to filter it out, continue to filter it using the English language, for example, and then focus on journal articles, right? So again, what you found is that I started with over 1 million results, and then through the sub-filterings that I've done, I've then achieved, a much smaller subset of results at only 35,000. Now I say small relative to 1 million. The next thing, or the next important suggestion I can make for Springerling for you to have a better experience on the platform is actually to uncheck this include preview only content box. So in practice, when you do that, you will be only limited to the results, and this number should fall significantly for you when logging in as a UTHM user. It should only then return results that you have 100% access to. So what this means is that whenever you uncheck this box, every article or book or whatever results that is here, you have full access to the full text. You can choose to read it online, or you can choose to download a copy of it as a PDF to read it offline. All right. So again, these are just wanted to showcase a way that you can improve your experience. But now, since we are here on the results page itself, there are a few more tips, or how you say, features that I can showcase by focusing on this area here in the results page itself. So once again, following up on my current filtering based on engineering, English, automotive engineering, and I only want to see journal articles, you can actually continue to add keywords to this. So let's say electric vehicles, right? And I narrow it down from 35,000 to 5,334 with the term electric vehicles. So I can actually try and add operators to this to make it more specific, as opposed to the two terms of electric and vehicles must be found. Now I want the term electric vehicles found next to each other by putting in this inverted commas next to the word, to making sure that the term is searched as a keyword in itself. And again, I have then reduced the results even further. I can then choose to sort the results based on the relevance to my filters and also my keywords, or I can choose to sort based on latest published or oldest published. These may have different ramifications or implications when you use it, and based on different functions. So for example, if you're searching for, obviously relevance plays a bigger role when you have very specific keyword or more and more keywords you attach to your search. But sometimes it's important to see what is the latest publication in your area, and therefore it's good to see newest first. Or if you wanted to use the oldest first function, you can thereby identify perhaps when was the first time a certain research was done about the area you're looking at. So it really helps to identify, okay, when was this first discussed, or when did the world of science, the research community, start looking into this particular area? So you can always do that. I think this oldest first function, I may be wrong or biased, but typically it's quite useful for you researchers in the social sciences area, as you wanted to, for example, identify who was the first to discover such a policy, or such an idea, of whoever conceptualized a particular idea. But more for newest first, it's actually more typically used by very fast-paced moving niches of research or interest, or for example, computer science, medicine, where you always want to identify where is the current status quo, because discoveries are made so frequently, and every day they may be a new benchmark towards what is being discovered, even on a daily basis. Right? You could also then limit your searches. For example, if this is way too much, I've often been advised in the past where you should perhaps mainly focus on research that was only published in the last few years. So let's say if I filtered my results only basing from 2019 to 2022, I can find that the majority of the discoveries for these particular sets of criteria that I've used for my results are more prevalent, as opposed to, let's say, if I did it between 2018 and 2015, perhaps you can see that the results is much lesser. So in a way, this tells me, or gives me the idea that research about this particular area has only really picked up in the last few years. So this is again another way for you to help I learned generally about this area of interest if you are not particularly an expert in that field in itself. So it just gives you more understanding of how fast progression of research has been done in these areas. And through this filtering processor, you can help to identify different groups or years of research that has been put into this particular area. Okay. Next is actually you can download the search results here. So let's say you wanted to go offline, and but you really satisfied with your your filtering so far. You can actually save this 716 results. You can save a maximum of 1,000 in actual fact by just clicking this download search results as a CSV file. So a CSV file, if you're not familiar, is a format type for Excel, where you can save each and every one of the names and the URL links for each of these results over here based on the criteria or arrangements that you've set forth previously. So that obviously you probably won't want to read all 716 today. You can actually come back again later, not necessarily online here, but also by accessing the CSV file that you downloaded. Next to it is this subscribe to via RSS. So if you are familiar with this icon, you've probably seen this in lots of different places before, including podcasts or other websites. Essentially what this does is actually, if you click on it, you must first actually create a profile for yourself, or else this function does not necessarily work. So when you create a profile for yourself, which isn't a very difficult process, you just put in a working email and set a password for yourself. And when you've done so and you've logged in, you can use this RSS feed to notify yourself if in the event that more articles or more results have been added to this set of criteria that you have created thus far. So let's say as of today, this number is 760. Tomorrow or in 1 week from now, there may be more results being published, more papers being published in these covering these particular fields, these keyword searches, etc. And you would obviously like to be notified of it because you're constantly trying to read up on the ongoings of this area, since you might be doing some research or literature review in it. So this helps by, if you click on it, you will be notified through your email that, okay, you're in your search criteria that you have set on this date, these are the terms. A new document has been published in the SpringLink platform covering this particular area, and therefore you might be interested to read in it. So again, this just helps to ease your pressure or your pain in doing lots of this reading or investigating kind of work, but it's just using technology to make your life a little bit easier. Okay, so I've explained this part of the platform in itself. Now it's actually a good time to perhaps go into one of those documents and to show you what an actual article looks like. I'm just going to take this first one. So you will notice that this article, now that I've clicked into it, as you can see, we are now in the home page of the article. So we're right at the document in itself. So this article is titled New Optimal Power Management Strategy for Series Plug-in Hybrid Electric Vehicles. It's published on 12th of December 2018. These are the three authors, or the people who did research and wrote the paper, but the person's name with the little envelope next to it is actually what we call the corresponding author. So the corresponding author is typically the main researcher of the research paper in itself. So that's the person you usually want to contact as if you have questions about the paper in itself, or you wanted to talk to them about collaboration and etc. That should be the person you should be contacting, and that little envelope should be his details for where he is, who he represents, and perhaps his contact details itself. Right? This paper is published in the International Journal of Automotive Technology. So if you're not familiar with what a journal or a journal article is, a journal article is essentially one document, one research paper that's published in one issue of a journal. And because journals are periodicals, right? Periodicals are a publication that is published in a certain period of time, meaning once every 2 months, once every month, etc., etc., etc. So this one was published in the issue of in 2018, right? And there are some metrics here to showcase the, I don't know, the usage or the popularity of this paper, or how many times it's even been cited. So because you're at the homepage of the paper, you'll actually be able to read the full text in itself if everything you've done up to this point is correct, right? You'll be able to read not just the abstract, but also the entire paper in itself, okay? So if you wanted to download the PDF, you just click PDF, download PDF here. And depending on the browser that you're using, you will either be asked to preview the document in itself, as you see over here, or you can actually, or your computer might immediately ask you to, your computer might have immediately saved the copy into your hard drive in itself. So as you can see, the PDF version is actually what we call DRM free, digital rights management free. This means you are able to actually touch the so-called virtually touch the article. It's not just an image, for example, where you can actually highlight individual words within or paragraphs in the document in itself. And this really helps to improve the usability of the PDF. So it's not just a plain Jane image, as I said, it actually incorporates metadata behind the document so that when you actually download a copy, when you saved it, you save the copy. And when you input that PDF into a reference manager program like Mendeley, EndNote, ReadCube, etc., it actually has the metadata behind it to help with some automation process. For example, automatically doing the citations and references for you. If you wanted to paraphrase, some of those programs have the ability to support that, or also simple things like just highlighting the text in itself, right? However, there is one slight, I would say disadvantage of a PDF is that because PDFs again are the reason they're chosen to be published as PDF is because it's easily accessible. Files are usually much smaller in size and take less bandwidth to download. The problem is with PDFs is that when it comes to images, they're still a 2D image, right? Because it's a PDF itself. So in situations whereby you have an importance placed on looking at the visuals or the images of a particular article, it is best to go back to the live view or the HTML view, because usually it is there where you will be able to get the full image, the full life-size big picture that you can blow up, you can crop much easier, you can actually download a soft copy of the image from that have been submitted by the authors themselves. So those are is another suggestion that I would give or I would suggest when using platforms such as Springerlink. So this again, going back here to this page, this is the homepage of the article. But now I want to redirect your attention to the homepage of a journal in itself. So if I click on this link, so that article again was published in this journal called the International Journal of Automotive Technology. And here now I'm in the homepage of the journal itself. So essentially I've taken one step, a broader view, one step up, right? So this journal, as you can see, this homepage gives a lot of information. You can see who the editor-in-chief is, what is its publishing model. And you can see its impact factor, how many times it's been downloaded in 2021. And you can actually see what is the latest issues and what are the latest articles in itself. So one common question I've always been asked by perhaps more junior researchers or students is, how do I identify, for example, a Springer journal is a good journal, or is any journal, for example, reputable, or how can I trust it? So for one, actually in consensus, I would say is perhaps the first judgment call or first criteria to meet is the journal itself published by a reputable publisher? So, and how do you recognize reputable publishers is typically through what your library trusts. So of course, you can always ask a librarian for that matter, but usually, again, if your library, for example, has a subscription to a major database like Springer, like Nature, like any of the other databases that I mentioned earlier, it is a good sign that these are that journal titles within those platforms or those databases can be trusted, right? But it's not always 100% the case. So there are other ways of doing so, and one of which is usually to look at the editorial board. So the editorial board helps you to give some personality or to give some again validation behind the trustworthiness of the journal. So for example, if you are a researcher or a student and you've been doing a lot of reading in this area of interest to this journal or the focus of this journal. So for again, this is automotive technology. If you've been doing a lot of reading about automotive technology, you might have come across some of these names before. So these names are usually experts from around the world, or from, in this case, because it's a very Korean-based journal, you can see lots of names from very prominent names from academic institution, research institutions, or even global or international organizations where these names often come up. You recognize them because they are researchers who have done a lot of work in this space and therefore have published lots of papers in these areas before. And then that helps you again to really validate. Do I trust it? Why? Yes. Why? Because I've done a lot of reading and I find that this guy's name, this person name, comes up a lot in the papers that I've read. And because this person is part of an editor or editorial team in this journal, for example, it would lead you to believe that a lot of not just that the articles being discussed in this journal particularly is relevant to you, but also it gives you credibility to the journal in itself, because these are the renowned experts in their field that are not only contributing to the paper, but also acting as the reviewers or the editorial board members to make sure that the quality of the paper is achieved, right? Then the other way of checking, and perhaps the more traditional way, is actually looking at the impact factor. So for those who are familiar with the term impact factor, if those who are not familiar with the term impact factor is essentially just measuring how popular or how credible a journal article is based on the number of citations it has received over the last 2 years. So usually the bigger the number, it means two things in general, is that the articles being published in this journal is of good quality, therefore they're being cited many times. And also the papers that are being published in this paper are also very popular because the discoveries that are in it are very meaningful and relevant to a lot of people and therefore get cited many, many times over, right? So those are just a few tips, or again, suggestions on how to identify good journals, or how do you know if a journal is more local or international based, or more, how do you want to double check that if you're not potentially looking at a predatory journal and therefore not from a reputable source. Those are just some of the indications of doing so. So again, just scrolling down to this on the homepage of the journal itself. Another last telltale sign is actually this abstracted or indexing. So if you have heard of the term Scopus index or even JCR or ISI, these are indexes, and indexes basically helps you to index against, like for example, like the telephone booth, the old telephone booth helps you to index from A to Z who should be in this criteria. And indexes help you to again qualify some of these journals depending on the formulation of those indexes. So as far as I'm aware, I think in Malaysia we are often putting a lot of emphasis on Scopus as a minimum requirement. So for again, if this journal, for example, is cited in Scopus, you can sort of believe trust it in that sense, because these are again part of the minimum requirements that we set for something that are trustworthy. But it doesn't necessarily mean, for example, if a journal is not indexed in Scopus or JCR or any of the other indexes that you see over here, that it means, oh, this is a bad journal. Again, each and every one of these different indexes has their own way to ensure, their own formula to calculate whether or not this journal should be included into their index or not. Now, Springer Nature, for one, is a publisher of this journal, as you see here, but we are not responsible for the indexing process. So indexes are run by third-party organizations, for example, Scopus, and they then determine by themselves what qualifies to be indexed in the Scopus indexation itself. And usually some of the criteria again are how long a journal has been published, how many times it's been cited minimally in the last 2 to 5 years, for example. Are there X number of articles being published in each of the issues, or has the journal, for example, gone dormant for the last few years and therefore been taken out? Sometimes you don't always necessarily, even established journals don't always necessarily meet those criteria and therefore do not get indexed in those different indexes. But it's just to give you a sense of, again, the quality, popularity, and trustworthiness of those titles. A common scenario that often occurs is when you are looking at a very new journal. So, for example, a journal that is only 1 year old, or maybe even the second year. So often not that those kinds of journals, although published by a very reputable publisher, are found on platforms like Springer Link, may not have an impact factor because it's not old enough to even receive one. It's not indexed in any of the popular or more recognized indexes because again, it's not published enough over its short history. And perhaps also, for example, its editorial board is relatively young and not well recognized because it may be from a very niche or emerging sector of research. So given all of that knowledge, hopefully this will give you some guideline or some, just general knowledge in helping you to identify what is a good or not necessarily a reputable journal in itself. One other highlight I wanted to showcase is actually the open access mode, open access journals. So this using another example, we've gone back to I've searched basically this is a blank search of all on Springer Link, and I wanted to show you what an open access journal is. So open access, if you're not familiar with the term, essentially means that the journal or the individual articles within the journal is published free to read to whoever is in the world, regardless of your association to any university, any organization. So what this means is when the author has decided to publish their manuscript in a platform like Springer Nature, they then tell us, the publisher, that I want this to be publicly available. They also then proceed to pay for an article publication charge, or APC, to the respective publisher in order to make sure that their content is made freely available, as opposed to a subscription-based article or journal, which usually means you must be somebody has to pay for it. In your case, it's your university library. They pay for subscription so that you as a member of UTHM are able to utilize those subscribed content. So looking at the samples here, you can see that there is this journal called Computational Visual Media. It has this little banner or little sign above the name of the journal that says open access. If we click into it, so this is a relatively new journal. It's not very, very old. It's only been around since 2015, for example. And it is a full open access journal. So there are three types of journal types that we have in terms of publishing model we have in the Springer Nature portfolio. You have the full subscription base, which is one example we saw earlier. This is open access, which is the complete opposite of the spectrum, which means everything is open access. And then in the middle of that spectrum, you have what we call the hybrid journal. So a hybrid journal means that some of the papers are open access, and because the authors themselves decide they want to publish their individual manuscripts as open access in a subscription-based journal. Whereas the one that we're looking here, again, computational visual media, is a fully open access. That means whenever an author submits their manuscript to this paper to be published, they are going in with the understanding that their paper will eventually be open access. That is not a choice, it is a requirement because this journal only publishes open access papers. So again, every article you find from this journal should have the indication of open access inside of it, right? So again, if you click on it, on the article itself, so this article is a survey of urban visual analytics, advances of and future directions. Even if you are not a UTHM student or lecturer or researcher or staff, you will be able to access, this full text as a whole, regardless of your association. So you don't you don't need to log in to your library portal or whatsoever. You will be immediately be able to download or even view a copy of it live online. Right? That's the difference between open access and what you call it, subscription or behind a paywall, as some of you may come to know it. All right. So this is the Springerling platform, as I mentioned earlier. I just want to take a very quick pause to perhaps take a sip of water. Just double check with Mabel because I can't see anything. Is there any questions of this thus far? Or if you would like to ask a question about Springerling quickly before I move on to nature.
Yep. Ken, just to make sure, can you hear me?
Now I can. Sorry, I probably lost you earlier.
Yeah. Okay. I see a couple questions here. The first one is about downloading the article. So as we know, there are many articles under one journal. Is there any way that we can download all the articles from one journal in one go?
Okay. So actually, the answer would be no. We will actually require that you download each article individually. And I'll be using an example here. Again, I go to this journal, for example, Chinese Journal of Polymer Science. If I go to the current issue, as you can see, you are only allowed to, there is no button to download the entire issue of this volume 40, issue 11. You would have to go into each individual article and then click download. Now, the reason for doing so is actually quite technical. Number one, the reason is being we do not want to. Your library is tracking the utilization of resources, and hence just having a button to click download one whole issue or all the articles from a single issue will be not really representative of the utilization. Second is because obviously every journal article is unique in its sense. So usually on talking about user behavior from an online or digital context, a person looking for this journal, this article, is not necessarily looking for this article and this article or even this article. Very rarely is the case where a journal user or researcher wants to read every single article from every single issue or paper. So that's why we don't create that function. But in any case, it doesn't mean we stop you from downloading every single article in doing so. So again, all you would have to do is just go into each individual article and just click download. You could do so. It's not, perhaps yes, it's a bit more steps taken, more clicks, so to speak, but there is no real limitation on preventing you in doing such. Again, why we don't put it in is just purely because that's just not the way we find that our users use these types of resources. When you're looking for something, you're looking for something rather specific in that area. So hence you are more likely to go into each and every one, read the abstract a little bit, find it interesting, then only download, rather than having to download the entire thing. Thanks for the question, Mabel. And next.
Yeah, that's true, because there can be thousands of articles under one journal. Yeah. And then the other and then the other question is, you mentioned impact factor is one of the metrics that to measure the impact of a journal. So is there a way, or is there a minimum impact factor number that is considered as good or bad?
Okay, so I think firstly, before I answer that question, I must make a slight caveat. I think representing from a publisher's perspective, for one, while I'm saying this, I'll probably pull up one example of a journal that has an impact factor. For one, I think one thing we must say is that impact factors should not necessarily be the only way to evaluate a journal's popularity or credibility. In fact, it's a very traditional way of measuring or having a metric to identify credibility in a sense. So that's the caveat I want to put out there. You may or may not agree with me, but from a publisher's perspective, we have our reasons why we say that. And actually, I'll explain. if you look at the way the impact factor is calculated, now without actually having to go through the actual formula and stuff, which is to me a little bit complicated, essentially what it measures is how many times articles from this journal, for example, Frontiers of Energy, has been cited divided by the number of articles it published, individual article it has published in the last 2 years. So that's just a very general way of explaining what the impact is. And I'm sure there are more experts on the call that may be more familiar with it. So if you just take that measurement in itself, it just means that the more times somebody has cited a paper in this journal, it can be any paper, it can be the same paper cited 100 times, divided by the number of articles that's actually published in the last 2 years or last 5 years, for example, for a 5-year impact factor. So the number can anywhere be from 0.001 all the way to the sky's the limit. And I believe the world record currently, or the journal with the highest impact factor currently being published is CA, a journal, a cancer for a journal, a cancer journal, for, if I'm not mistaken. And that has an impact factor of like 100 plus. And again, why that may be misleading in certain sense, is not saying that it's misleading because, oh, you shouldn't trust the impact factor, because obviously it's a good way to measure it. But what does the scale of the metrics place the perception of different journals, because they're on opposite ends of the scale? So what I mean is, for example, if you have 2 journals from the same areas of research, let's say engineering, or even automotive engineering for that matter, two different journals with 2 different impact factors. One has an impact factor of 1. One has an impact factor of 10. Do I say then that the journal of impact factor of 10 is better than the journal of impact factor of 1? Not necessarily, because again, it's just a measure of, for example, how many times an article has been cited from either one of those journals. And it actually does not measure the spread of the citations. Rather, it measures the total number of citations. So the spread of citations can be, even if in the journal that has a higher impact factor, that maybe only a very small group of articles that have been published are the ones receiving the majority of the citations, whereas the rest of the remaining majority of articles actually receive very little citation in that from those publications in itself. So that's also one issue with impact factor, or not an issue, but to a caveat to say that it's not a perfect measure of citations, or a way that how you can trust the credibility or popularity of a journal. Another way is also if you look at the differences between subject areas. So for example, if I were to take a very fast moving subject area like medicine, right, where there are a lot of clinical studies, lots of research paper, lots of money being pumped into research in that area in medicine, versus an area that is less popular, let's say archaeology, let's say, just generalizing, please don't quote me. As opposed to as opposed to archaeology, medicine traditionally receives a lot more research, and therefore a lot more citation is being done, as opposed to archaeology. So typically what will happen is in most cases, a journal covering medicine will have a highest impact factor as opposed to a journal covering archaeology. But it is in no way saying that the archaeology journal is of less quality. It's purely based on the pace of research being done in that area as opposed to medicine. So if I compare, for example, medicine to computer science, another very fast-paced industry or subject matter, you may find that maybe even computer science is a lot faster than that medicine journal. So again, there are differences in the scale, but what I'm trying to say is, even if a journal has 0.1 or another one has 100, it doesn't only mean that should not be your only criteria in determining whether it's a good or bad journal. Sorry, very roundabout way to explain it, but I hope that answers.
Yeah, I think in brief, it depends on the subject, as well as impact factor should not be the only one to measure the impact of a journal.
Mm.
Yeah, but we will have more time discuss later on because looking at the time, we still have some questions, but I think we should go ahead with nature, and then at the end we
Sure,
go back to the questions.
sure. Good suggestion, Mabel. Thanks. I know I tend to blabber on too much. So okay, moving on to nature. So nature, as I mentioned, is another one of our major platforms or websites that, through the grace of the library, has actually brought access to you as a UTHM user. So for one thing, nature, like I mentioned earlier, is the world's premier, what we call, of course we're a bit biased, but with the world's premier multidisciplinary journal. If you want to talk about impact factor, it is the one with the highest impact factor in the areas of multidisciplinary sciences. Uh, I think for those of you in the social sciences side, you will also still find articles relevant to you, because Nature, in a way, publishes results or manuscripts that are relevant or that should be relevant to every single human being on Earth. That is the prerogative of Nature. So Nature is also 150 years old. Sorry, more than 150 years old. I think we celebrated 150th 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And it's been around for very long, and it's been publishing as a weekly publication ever since it started. And its objective is actually to publish highly impactful, highly fundamental research and discoveries that are pertinent and relevant to anybody on Earth. And that's the uniqueness about Nature in itself. So Nature is often described as not really a journal, but it's described more as uh, like a magazine. So very similar. A lot of people have in your mind think that Nature, for example, is like the National Geographic magazine, or even Reader's Digest or Forbes magazine for that matter. That is because when you take a look at Nature, and if you have ever come across the physical copy before, um, or if you come to the website like we're seeing here, you will find that Nature doesn't look very much like a traditional journal. But I can assure you very much so, it is very much a highly reputable journal, right? It is functions the same, publishes the same as a traditional journal, like how you see previously in any of the Springer examples that I showed you earlier. The only difference is, again, and the reason why people misunderstand or misjudge it or think that it's like a magazine is because Nature also publishes a front half. Now, front half is more of a publication term, but essentially what it means is that it doesn't only publish research papers, so actual research articles or review papers. It also publishes news articles. It also publishes briefings. It also publishes journalistic content that are written by professional journalists who have backgrounds in formal sciences. So that's why if you like what you see over here, you can find that it's a bit more interesting, it's a bit more colorful. And the front half typically means the first part when you have a chance to hold a nature journal, is you will find the front part has more what we call news related briefings. You have book reviews, etc., etc. And these are all because they are written by in-house professional uh, editorial writers or journalists that have backgrounds in the sciences themselves. So why this is done is actually to make the research, the pretty hardcore research that is published in Nature, a bit more relatable to the common folk. So if Nature were to only publish the very serious articles, as I'm showing here, for example, a lot of these may just mean jargon or very are not easily understood by most people. And Nature places a lot of emphasis in making the findings that are published in Nature relevant, as I've said, to make it interesting, relevant, and important, even to the person who is not a learned person in that particular subject matter. So, as for example, for someone who has a background in business, you may not understand the terminologies when talking about, for example, COVID-19, right, in a medical term. But our in-house editors plays and tries their very best to try and write articles in their own right, to decipher and to put it in more plain English, the discoveries that are published within nature and also those that are found sometimes outside of nature in itself. So this helps to, for example, to keep you up to date, and is why very many people, regardless of your background, in your niche or your research, read papers or journals like Nature, is so that you stay up to date on the general discoveries or fundamental changes in our world. So, for example, when the Higgs boson particle was discovered, when when's the latest rovers landed on the surface of Mars, when we talk about the discovery of COVID-19, for example, all of these things. So our editors would write content in more plain English and supported by the findings, the facts, the research that are being published in Nature itself, in the very research articles in itself, so that it again makes it a lot easier for a person who is not an expert in that field to understand and to read, and therefore to gain the benefit from having access to nature in itself. So that's the front half. And of course, there's always the added fact that because it's a weekly publication, there are lots and lots of wonderful front covers to enjoy when it comes to nature itself. If we scroll more towards the back half, that's where you start to begin to see the actual review or research papers that are published. So these are the actual manuscripts that are being submitted to Nature editors, which are all in-house. Again, another unique feature of the Nature organization and the papers that we publish and under the journals that we publish is that all editors are 100% in-house editors. It means unlike the rest or the other kind of journals, including the ones that you saw from Springer earlier, whereby the editors themselves are typically part-time editors, but full-time academicians and researchers, Nature editors are 100% full-time editors. So their only job is to make sure they uphold and keep the quality of the publication, and of course the peer review that goes through, that is imposed on every single manuscript that is submitted in itself. So you can then therefore say that all of these articles that are published go through an extremely rigorous process of peer review, and I believe the rejection rate for Nature in itself is in the high 90%. And I mean, if correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I think later you can share your knowledge as well. I think Nature in itself receives thousands of submissions on a weekly basis, so you can imagine the rejection rate that goes through, that is placed in order to make sure that we only publish the most important, the most extremely fundamental papers in Nature in itself, and hence why it then recognizes or gains an extremely large following and also impact factor for that matter. So if I open up one of these articles that are published, for example, you can see the look of it in the journal, in the article homepage is very similar to what you see in Springer in itself. This is where you can read the full abstract, and if so determined by the author, by the editorial team, if the paper is not too long, they would show the entire paper in this page itself. If not, again, you can click to download a copy of the journal, of the article in itself. So this particular paper is an accelerated article preview, which means that it's actually published early online, so that because obviously this paper is about COVID-19 again, and obviously the faster that we publish it, the more benefit that the world or humanity stands to gain, as opposed to keeping it behind a paywall. So those are just, again, some just a hint of the emphasis that big publishers like Springer Nature go through in order to make sure that everyone stands to benefit from reading articles being published in Springer, in Nature in itself. Okay, so this is an example that I wanted to take to show you that if you were able, if the importance of certain images are to you or from a particular article, it's better to view it online as opposed to PDF, because you will be able to get a better or full image with full clarity, as opposed to one that you would have to crop from a PDF and then enlarge further, which will obviously then make it more granulated or more pixelated for that matter. So these are, actual um, images that have been submitted by the authors who publish with us. So these are the actual files, if you can imagine. So they obviously come with full clarity and with better, how you say, with easier, better distinction between obviously the individual marks of within the graph or the image itself. So for those of us who are working in, for example, biology, if you're looking at slides under the microscope or even in an electron microscope, for example, obviously the finer details are what makes an image, and those are the important data points that you are typically looking for in a research in itself, because those are where the information lies within, in its sense. So as you can see, Nature has this, and if we go back to the home page, all right, it's aligned in a way where it's more friendly to read, because even if you don't understand the hard science behind it, there are lots of reading material that are helping you to understand what's being published, and it's a good way to keep up to date, abreast on really what's going on in the world of science in general over time. But nature.com is not limited to just the Nature journal in itself. You scroll to the bottom, there's this journal A to Z section, and you will find you will be able to navigate between all, I think now 100 plus journals found on nature.com, including the academic journals I mentioned earlier. Not all of them are subscribed content, again, because this is determined by the library to be what is in focus or necessary for your university. But you will find that a lot of the journals themselves are now hybrid journals, and therefore there are articles within even the subscription-based journals that are accessible to you regardless of your affiliation to UTHM. So I implore you to navigate throughout the platform to look at the different journals. As you can see, just under the Nature, because we start with N, you can see all the different types of journals or different niche areas. So we have everything from the Nature main title, which covers broadly everything under sciences, all the way to things like Nature Food, sustainability, machine intelligence, materials, you have protocols for those of you interested in laboratory experimentation. You have human behavior. So actually Nature has started to publish or launch more and more new Nature branded titles that cover more areas of social sciences, as opposed to previously having a very heavy hand on the physical sciences side, like Nature, for example, the first title. But more importantly is that every new Nature title that is being launched approaches the subject in a holistic manner. So for example, Nature Climate Change does not only publish research about the sciences, that core sciences of climate change, for example, global warming and how the precipitation of rain and changing climates and the melting of ice in the North Pole, but also the impact of it in the humanity, in a sense of humanity. So for example, who is affected by climate change? What are the economics of climate change? What are the financial implications to economies because of climate change taking place in certain areas? So like Nature Climate Change, every new Nature branded journal that is launched, on average 3 new ones a year, are looking at to publish about information that is a more holistic view of the science itself, not purely about the hardcore, or you call it the more hardcore science or the more technical aspect of it itself. So as you can see, there are, although Nature Climate Change is a subscription journal that's not necessarily available at UTHM, you will find articles that are published in open access that you can still read because they have been made, published as OA papers in itself, right? So I encourage you to take advantage of them, obviously, because these are really valuable resources that at this point made available freely to you, and obviously they will serve you well. I believe in even if it's just about for you to improve your general knowledge of things, but also if you are actually doing, actual research in those areas. So because these are again, highly recognized titles written by the world's renowned researchers in that area. They've gone through extreme levels of peer review to make sure that the science behind it is robust and obviously important and meets the standards, the rigorous standards that we set. And therefore, when you cite them or when you use them to back up your own research, they will be extremely valuable in supporting your own hypothesis, etc. So with that being said, I think I have reached the end of my so-called presentation or training today. Hopefully that leaves us with a little bit of time to answer what remaining questions we might have left. Abel, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Ken. Yeah, we do have two more questions left from the first session. The first one is about the Mendeley, because you mentioned the authors or users can download the articles and then save it to Mendeley. So I think it's more about how can they download from Springer to the Mendeley library.
Okay, so it doesn't matter where you download from. It can be from Springer, it can be from Nature, it can be from any of the databases. What I was trying to say earlier was that if you're using a reference manuscript manager or a program like Mendeley, EndNote is another one that is quite often used, but perhaps very expensive. I think Mendeley, there's a free version. Another one with a free version is ReadCube. You can look up, and what you have to do is essentially just download the PDF. And because these PDFs have what we call metadata embedded into the PDF itself, right? Metadata are things like, for example, links that can be hyperlinks that can be recognized by those software programs. You just have to take this file, drag it into your Mendeley that you're using, that you have an account in, and then the program can then do the things that you ask it to do. For example, again, do the citations based on a certain format that you want, right? Depending what your supervisor asks or whatever is the citation format in your field. It can also help you to manage the what do you call it, the versions that you're looking at. So oftentimes, for example, if you're looking at a very old paper, the metadata that, let's say an article has been published maybe more than 10 years ago, when you upload a copy of that file into your like a Mendeley, sometimes you can actually search for other relevant papers related to that paper using that program because of the metadata that's associated with it. Okay, because if we scroll to the bottom of every article, you should find, sorry, not the exact bottom in this case. Go to the reference page. Oh, where is it? Sorry, this is a very bad example for me. But okay, sorry. When you find the references in every paper, right? The reference page, where is it? Okay, I don't know why I'm not finding it. There will be a list of citations that this paper has cited, correct? And the reference manager, through the metadata embedded in this PDF, can actually go to each and every one of those papers directly. So that helps if you can, instead of then reading it one by one line, and then going to each of the different databases to read that article. So those are just examples of how a program like Mendeley will be able to assist you. I think I answered the question. I hope so.
Yeah, I think just basically download and put it under your Mendeley library, and then you are able to refer it from time to time.
Yeah, and do all of bunch of other automated things you can do with it instead of you doing it yourself. Yeah.
Okay, another question is about the review of the articles. As you know, article in ResearchGate, there is a review for that particular article that you read. So is it possible to also see the review of the articles in Springer, under Springer Link?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part? So you wanted to see
Oh,
the
okay.
review of that
The
article.
review of that article, because as you know, ResearchGate also has a review of that particular
Ah,
article. And then do we have also that kind of review of the articles on the Springerling or nature.com?
not unless the actual review is published. ResearchGate and databases like Springerling and Nature.com are two completely different animals in their own right. So ResearchGate is more of a platform or a platform whereby a researcher tends to upload a copy of their maybe not yet published version of their paper to get feedback and obviously reviews from other experts, as opposed to going through the peer review process before submitting, while submitting for manuscript publication. So the reviews that are posted on ResearchGate, for example, those are not, not to say they're not formal reviews, they are, but they're posted in a way that is not part of the review process.
Do you
So
mean
often
preprint?
not preprint, yeah, for example, the pre-printed version, they upload it on places like ResearchGate or even other preprint platforms where they go and the whole purpose of doing so is to get feedback from the scientific community on how you can improve your paper before it goes to the final publication process, which still means it also has to go through peer review at the end. So you don't see those reviews, those kind of comments that people leave about, oh, this paper, you should improve it by adding this protocol to your experimentation, etc., etc. You don't see those on the published version, of the article in Springer or Nature or anywhere. Not unless somebody then formally reviews a paper, and those are published as review manuscripts. So those you could find, actually, you can find those quite easily under the Nature review journals. So for example, if I try, oops, sorry. If I go to journal A to Z, so for example, this one, Nature Reviews Cancer. So everything in Nature Reviews Cancer is a review paper. So basically what they do, these articles are reviews of other articles that have been published before. Right? So basically these authors have been invited to do a review about a previous research or previous technique or previous protocol, and to give their opinion on perhaps maybe the real world application of such a technique or etc. or finding, as opposed to the ones that are in ResearchGate, for example. Those are more like you put your preprint or even your final final published manuscript on a platform like ResearchGate, and you ask your community around you, like-minded experts, to talk about it, to provide a more like a more social media like platform where people can give comment and you can receive those comments or even rebut those comments based on to create this conversation around your research. Yeah, so those are two different things that you don't necessarily see those in ResearchGate in Springer unless it's a proper review paper.
Yep. All the articles on our platforms are peer review, and we do have a preprint service, but it is under another topic, and it is called in review. Maybe in the future we have time to discuss it further. Um, I don't see any more questions, and also looking at the time, I think this is uh, the time for us to play a little game that we mentioned in the beginning. That this is a secret word game. So
Yeah.
Ken has mentioned many times of that particular word. So if anyone have an idea, now just put it in the question box, and the first one to get it correctly will receive a prize from us. So
Yeah.
guess as many as you can, and maybe Ken, you can give them some more tips. Yeah, the first
Sure.
try is Springer, and I can tell you not correct.
So I've said the word a few times, not very many times. I purposely did that because I didn't want to mislead people. But the word that we are looking for, the first clue I will give, it has, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 alphabets. There are
Pretty
13
long.
alphabets in the here. It's not a very difficult word. It's a somewhat descriptive word.
Yeah, think about the journals, the books that we distribute.
Yeah, everybody can try any number of times. Just keep spamming the chat box, and the moment we see, or Mabel sees the
Mm.
correct term or word,
I can only tell you guys that not Springer, not nature, not Springer link. Someone gets the library tours, which is too long, and I won't regard it as one word. It's really one word. Not nature, not nature. A long word. How many alphabets? 13, you say? Ken?
13 should be
Yeah,
13. Let me count it.
13.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yes. I can give another clue. Do you mind if I give another clue? I'll
Yep,
give
go
the
ahead.
meaning of the word. I'll give the meaning of the word. So the meaning of the word, I don't know according to which dictionary, but just hear me out. The meaning of the word is, quote, existing, occurring, or carried out on between nations, close quote.
Is a okay. It's not reference. Yeah, someone put references, and it's not. Can you give out the first alphabet?
The first alphabet starts with the alphabet I. I for igloo. I. I
Can you
like that.
see it,
I like
Ken?
that. I like that one with that example that starts with I. Yeah, that's a good one. But no, unfortunately, no, we haven't seen
Yeah.
the word yet.
It's not interrogation. It's not introduction. It's not investigation.
I think I hide the word in my presentation quite well. Quite well. I say again the meaning of the word, okay? Quote,
Ah,
existing, occurring, or
we got a
carried between
winner. We got
nations.
a winner.
Oh,
We
we
got a
have.
winner. Yeah,
Can you tell who it is, Mabel?
congratulations to Chi Sun Yui. The correct word
Congrats.
is international. Yeah, congratulations to you. And I will send you a private message. Um, yeah,
Yeah, please stay on. Cheat the winner. Please stay on and respond to Mabel in the chat section because she needs to get your contact details. But for the
yeah,
rest, thank you for joining. I hope it has been engaging. I hope I've not talked too much nonsense. Or I hope you have gained some information or knowledge from this session. Thank you for your time very much for taking out of your busy schedule today to come and listen to us about both SpringerLink and Nature.com. And again, big thank you to UTHM Library for helping us to organize this session. Without them, it's not possible. And of course, without them, it's not possible for you to have access to the vast amounts of resources available on both platforms in itself.
um, I forgot to put something. Sorry, everybody. And I said in the beginning there will be attending form that you need to put your name. So just bear with me. Um,
Yeah, stay on. I think
uh,
you need to fill in, help us to
stay
fill
on
in a
a little
form.
bit. Yeah. So in the chat box there is a form for you to put your name uh, as an attendance list. So
Mm.
please put everything over there, please. Thank you.
Mm. And
And
to the winner,
yeah,
this is your prize. We will be sending it to you. So again, please make sure you send your details to Maple.
yeah, I have
So,
received the email, and I will follow up with you on the mailing address, etc., etc. And last but not the least, I want to thank you once again for UTHM Library support in organizing this training with us. And we will collaborate and decide what other topics in the future which will be beneficial to all of you. And after the webinar, there is a survey. So please fill in and help us understand what you think about the webinar. And you can fill in the topics for the coming webinars. And a follow-up email will be sent to you tomorrow with the e-certificate. So thank you once again, everybody. And wish you good luck, good health, and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.